Hey, this is Brian again, and I'd like to ask you to do a favor. We can't do this work without people like you, so if you can, please like, share, subscribe, tell your friends about Bring Back the Porch.
Now you see restaurants sort of changing that language to be, we are gluten friendly, we are gluten aware, and part of that is because of the limitations with saying you're gluten free, you can potentially there could be legal ramifications behind that. I think that's probably a big push.
This episode of Bring Back the Porch brought to you by Bernie Leahy, River Street Realty. Let's get you home. May is Celiac Awareness Month in the province of Alberta, and to talk about that affliction today, from the Calgary Celiac Association, Lisa Serrato, and from the Medicine at Celiac Support Network, Grace Torrance. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having us.
So we're going to have a month-long awareness campaign for celiac disease. It's a disease, or I'm not sure what is it, a disease?
It is considered to be a disease,
oh,
yes.
Okay, all right. Now, so why do we need a month to bring awareness to something that I know a lot of people already suffer from?
That's an excellent question. I think that there is a lot of misinformation out there in regards to the condition and, what it takes to be diagnosed with celiac disease and how to navigate the day-to-day challenges that we have around it. So really, we take the opportunity for Celiac Awareness Month to, meet with local partners, meet with people of Parliament or government, and really try to help to educate and advocate for members of our association and members of the public who do understand that there are day-to-day challenges going through celiac.
What's the coordination between the Calgary Celiac Association and Medicine Hat?
That's a great question. So I remember, when I was initially diagnosed back in 2008, I think that there was a Medicine Hat chapter or something happening because I was living here at that time. And they have previously had like a peer support group of some sort, and they have done a couple of events and such. Obviously with COVID happening in 2019, 2020, that really kind of put a damper on things. So we recognize as a Calgary chapter the importance of reaching out to members and the public across southern Alberta and really trying to, as I mentioned, advocate and educate people and support them where they're at. So we recognize that Medicine Hat and Lethbridge and some of the smaller communities are in a position where they could potentially be leading some of these projects and things on their own. So it's really about us providing some connection support to help facilitate that.
You said you were diagnosed in 2008.
Yes.
So you lived a long time not knowing that you had it.
Well, that's correct. That's correct. Celiac disease is a funny little thing. It can, typically you're born with a gene. It can be transferred genetically, and sometimes that gene lives dormant. And I think that that's what happened, certainly in my case. I went on to have a surgery, and I got quite sick post-surgery. And just that massive inflammation triggered the event. And so quite often that can happen for a number of people, whether it's a physical stressor, such as an illness, or whether it's an emotional stressor, just as like extra stress in your life. That typically tends to be the norm. I don't know if you found the same thing, Grace.
Mine was interesting because I had symptoms all my life, but nobody equated it to celiac because they were atypical. So I underwent a lot of investigations, and we didn't really know, and I developed other autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis. And then I did a bunch of reading, and I went to my doc and said, I think this could be, and he did blood work, and it was like, and then sent to a specialist, which is kind of the process. And I can trace it back. I had problems when I was at the age of getting a smallpox vaccine, and I wasn't allowed to get one because I had something going on, and they didn't know. So we can trace it back to that young with me, but I didn't have, at that time, way back, it was typically very thin kids who were failure to thrive, and I wasn't that body type. And so it just presented different ways. And I was only diagnosed about 10 years ago.
How many people do you think are living today with undiagnosed celiac?
Well, we have seen the research, even from the time I was diagnosed, they said about 1 in every 133 people out there have celiac disease. And now they're saying it's about 1 in 100 have it. And those who potentially have celiac disease, probably 80% of them have no idea. Yeah. It really presents itself in so many different ways. As Grace mentioned, sometimes you're asymptomatic, but there's literally over 300 symptoms associated with celiac disease.
300 symptoms.
Yeah.
Well, no wonder your doctor couldn't nail it down right off the bat. So someone who has celiac, what should they be looking for? Or maybe they don't know they have it, and what are the symptoms that maybe should raise a red flag?
For sure. Grace, do you want to start taking that?
Well, there's so many different symptoms. Most of the common ones that you would think are gut symptoms, because it is an inability to digest gluten, and it causes damage to your small intestine, to the villi. So that's the symptoms that we tend to hear or think about. But for me, for example, I had no enamel on my teeth. I developed really bad cold sores, and they wouldn't go away, which makes sense now because that's your oral, right? Presentation of it. Other people develop autoimmune disorders like rheumatoid arthritis, or I can't say it's Sjogren's disease. Lisa, what?
So, as Grace mentioned, those gastrointestinal symptoms they're typically the ones that we think of. So, bloating, constipation, diarrhea, abdominal upset, but also very common are there's a skin disorder called dermatitis herpetiformis, and so
Easy
it's like
for you to say.
I know. Usually I could say it really well, but that's a kind of like a skin rash condition that can happen. As Grace alluded to, the dental enamel things. For me, it was kind of more of those heartburn, bloating, that kind of thing, but also infertility issues.
Okay. Yeah. So is it something that is constant or just in and out? Like if you eat something, that triggered it, that's why I had that problem. That you don't really understand that it's an ongoing thing.
Well, definitely when you have been diagnosed, there is only one cure for celiac disease, and that is to live a gluten-free lifestyle. There really is no typical cure, right? So if we are accidentally exposed to gluten in different ways, whether it be cross-contamination in a restaurant or a meal at someone's home, the reactions that we have to gluten can be minimal. Some people, again, as I mentioned, are asymptomatic. They don't feel anything, but there is still damage being done to the small intestine and to the villi, right? And for some people, the reaction is quite immediate, and they tend to have those gastrointestinal issues. Think about it like your body is almost rejecting it like it's a poison, right? Okay. And so the longer that we stay away from eating those things, probably the more severe the reaction would become, right? And it's certainly not like an anaphylactic allergy or anything like that. But to bring it into perspective, the amount of gluten that can make a difference in making damage in your body, if you were to take, say, a loaf of bread, and you had a crumb of that bread that was about the size of a sesame seed, that's the amount that is required that would do damage to your system.
So just don't do it.
So it's pretty mind-blowing, right?
Yeah.
And, when it's left untreated, it really can lead to a number of other health conditions. So with the gut not really absorbing nutrients, that leaves us more susceptible for things like anemia. Osteoporosis can be quite common, right? Because your bone density is being impacted. And even, in gastrointestinal cancers as well.
Gluten-free, we hear that all the time, but I know people who have had something and it said gluten-free, but it wasn't, and they suffered. What do we do about food labeling and packaging? Anything can be done?
Well, that's certainly, what we work with Celiac Canada to advocate so strongly for. They do have a gluten-free certification program in which, vendors who are creating products can go through the guidelines, and it's you have to have less than 20 points per million of gluten in the product for it to be designated as gluten-free. One thing that I have noticed since my diagnosis is that when you eat out in a restaurant, you are starting to see the language change in the restaurant industry. Initially, you saw a lot of menus that said gluten-free. These are the items that we have. In order for them to have that claim, they typically have to have a 100% dedicated gluten-free kitchen or space allocated towards that. And otherwise, there is higher risks of cross-contamination, right? So now you see restaurants sort of changing that language to be, we are gluten-friendly, we are gluten-aware. And, you know, part of that is because of, you know, the limitations with saying you're gluten-free, you can, you know, potentially, there could be legal ramifications behind that. I think that's probably a big push. But it's also, to me personally, I'd rather know ahead of time if somebody says they're gluten-free or gluten-aware or whatever, to be able to optimally make that option myself. At the end of the day, it's important for somebody who has celiac disease to advocate for themselves.
Speak up.
And be educated, right? So don't always depend on what you might read or hear. There's nothing wrong with questioning if you're not certain about something, and feel free to walk away, right? At the end of the day, it's your dollar, it's your health.
Yeah.
And I think, Brian, the other thing when you're shopping is that many companies don't have the money to go through the process of getting the designation from the Canadian Celiac Association. So anyone with celiac disease becomes expert at reading labels, because we read all the labels to find out if there is any wheat in the product so that we can have it or not have it. And the same thing goes with restaurants, as Lisa was saying before. Like, I'll look at menus online and I'll actually contact the restaurant ahead of time, because there will be things like they will say nachos, for example. Well, I will contact them and say, do you make your own nachos, or are they bagged nachos? Because are they fried in a shared fryer where your breaded chicken wings are, for example? So there's and it's, it just adds to that stress for many people of eating out. So lots of people with celiac disease want to eat out, but choose not to because of the risks. And some people will suffer after they are glutened, like Lisa said, immediately. But some people can have things like brain fog that can last for a week, or general malaise for days on end. So you start to recognize in your body what your reaction is, and you may have just a small amount and have a small reaction, or you can have a small amount and have a big reaction.
What is a day like living with celiac disease and trying to be gluten-free? Sounds like it's a challenge. It's not easy.
It can be, certainly. I mean, as Grace alluded to, you know, we're always reading labels. We're always thinking about if we're going to be dining out or traveling. Traveling is a big consideration to think about, especially if you're looking at long-distance travel and navigating airport situations and things like that. That can be a little bit more. It's something that we have to be hyper vigilant about, right? But it just kind of becomes part of our lifestyle. And I think the biggest thing that I would say is that we want to normalize it, right? We don't, we want to draw attention to this condition, and we want to advocate for our rights. But at the same time, that's not everything that encompasses who we are, right? So it's important to to do the homework and to ask the questions, but also recognize that, sometimes we just want to go out for a pizza,
Yeah.
We don't want to have to think about all the legwork, and that gets to be a challenge. And that's where, having the opportunity to kind of converse with other people who have celiac disease about the frustrations, the day-to-day things that we go through.
Misconceptions about celiac disease?
Well, I'll just add to the daily living, and then we can talk about the misconceptions. One of the things that I think about a lot is the cost of our food, because gluten-free food is more expensive. For example, if you were to go to a regular grocery store and buy a gluten-free loaf of bread, it's usually in the range of $8.99 to $10 a loaf, versus what regular bread is.
And they're usually smaller.
Yeah, and they're much smaller. If you're a Costco member, it's cheaper, but that's just the way it goes. So that gives you an idea. Gluten-free food is more expensive, and in these times, I think for some people, that becomes an extra stressor. Coming to your question on misconceptions, that's an interesting question.
Well, I would go back to the comment I made earlier about how much does it take to make a difference in making damage, right? Just that minute amount. So if you think about things like, a little bit of it's not going to kill you, right? So things like if you're living with someone or you're going to visit someone in a home that has celiac disease, it's really important that they have separate kitchen items, right? A separate toaster, separate cutting boards, some people have separate like pasta colanders and knives and, separate areas in the kitchen where they store their items. It's a challenge to try and navigate it when you have a shared household, for sure. And, what Bruce was saying about the grocery costs, some of the items can be up to a 500% markup, right? And when you think about that, if you have, maybe one or two people in your family who are living gluten-free, and the cost value of that over the price over the year, that's quite considerable. And, recently we have had, Celiac Canada sort of led the charge in taking a petition to the federal government to advocate for us to have $1,000 tax credit to put towards celiac disease. And unfortunately, we've run into some hiccups in the way, and now we're back at the drawing board again. Mm-hmm. But, even the frustration and the process of, we can claim gluten-free items in our tax returns, but the amount of legwork that's required.
And the bookkeeping.
It's huge, right? Like having to itemize each and every item that you buy and then do a cross comparison of cost. It's crazy. So that's why we thought, wow, this tax credit would be a fantastic thing. And when you think about where we're at nowadays with, food insecurity is becoming such a big thing, right? And if it's already costing the average person with celiac disease like thousands of dollars more to be able to eat gluten-free, then how do we deal with our vulnerable populations?
Exactly.
Right? So, people are accessing places like the food bank and the root cellar and things like that a little bit more. So really trying to also educate people that when you're thinking about doing donations to those organizations, gluten-free food is also something that's extremely important.
And I would just say when we have had a meeting with the root cellar and the food bank, and they indicated that about 10% of their population require gluten-free food. Now, whether they are celiac or they are gluten sensitive, because that is another diagnosis, is gluten sensitivity. But I think that's important to recognize, and I think it's because of the cost of gluten-free food.
Okay. What are we going to be doing in Medicine Hat for Celiac Awareness Month?
Well, we have a number of things planned, and I want to say we've only kind of come together in the last 2 months, a very small group of us, and we're trying to get this going. So and I have to make sure I get my dates correct, so if I'm incorrect,
it's okay to refer to
me.
notes, because...
Yeah.
Yes, that's what I'm just looking for, the dates.
The light up is the 16th.
Yeah, okay. Yes, here we go. So the first one is we're doing a focus group, and we're hosting it at the Root Cellar in the evening on Wednesday, May 6th at 7. And the purpose of that is to get people who live gluten-free, either celiac or just choosing to live that way, to get together to talk about what the issues are in Medicine Hat and how we can move forward to support that community. And then we are going to have, and it's on, is it World Celiac Awareness
So it's International Celiac Awareness Day, which they refer to as Shine a Light. And it's where a variety of landmarks around the world are lit up in green. And that's our colors. So International Celiac Awareness Day happens to be on the 16th of May. So it's going to be at the Samus Teepee.
Okay.
So we ask people to gather together, go and take photographs, and hashtag Medicine Hat Celiac Support Network and hashtag Calgary Celiac, and just really try and spread the word out there on social media about who we are.
And related to that, on the same day, in the morning, we're having a pancake breakfast, gluten-free pancake breakfast.
I was going to say.
At the She Shed, which is up on Crescent Heights on 51 Tweed Avenue. And it will be from 9 to 11. And we have secured a number of local businesses to help us to sponsor at that pancake breakfast. And that's really important, to have local businesses help to bring awareness to the community. And so we're really thankful to the She Shed for offering. It's a gluten-free bakery, so we're having it outside their premises, but the Root Cellar will be collecting donations at that for the Root Cellar, and they are giving us the locations to have our meetings at. And Mike's Meats is donating sausage. Freshco and Icy Mountain Water and Grand Rental Station have contributed financially to that. There is a gluten-free flour product company out of Calgary that's donating our pancake mix called Cut Cooking. And so we have some good partnerships starting to develop within Medicine Hat.
That's good to have a support from the community.
Absolutely. And, you know, when you go around to the different grocery stores and things like that in town, too, each section has its own little flavor of what they like to carry for gluten-free. And what I do want to make a mention of is M&M Meat Markets. They have agreed to provide a discount to those who have a coupon that we provide at the breakfast and at the focus group. And so for the May 16th date, they will provide a discount as well for people who want to come in and purchase gluten-free foods from their organization.
Are you wearing a Calgary Celiac
I sure am.
jersey? What's the connection between Calgary and Medicine Hat? How are you working together?
So the Calgary Celiac Association has been around since 1980, and we have just finished a recent round of our strategic plan for the years of 2026 through 2029. And part of our initiatives, when we look at sort of the big picture goals, it's things like education, advocacy, community awareness, providing connections to community events, and sustainability of our organization. And I think, again, we tie it back to, we know that Medicine Hat and Lethbridge previously used to have what we called satellite versions of chapters where they did a number of different things on their own. And Calgary Celiac is really trying to bring that back into the fold, right? And let them know that, it does take a lot of efforts behind the scenes. So if we can help to support some of the local initiatives that are happening between Medicine Hat and Lethbridge on a smaller scale, whether it's financial support, whether it's volunteer support, whether it's helping behind the scenes with materials and things like that. So the idea behind that is to really set basically a band of volunteers who are willing to do the work on each end in different cities. And, some of the messages that we use are directly from Celiac Canada, and then some of the flavoring that we have is more local. So there will be our website in Calgary Celiac, there will be a Lethbridge page and a Medicine Hat page added, and on there we'll have events or articles. Some of the volunteers that have been identified in both locations will be contributing to the newsletter, and so it's really about like spreading the word across Southern Alberta about these are the great things that we can help people with when they're navigating, especially if they're newly diagnosed. That's a huge thing.
A resource for people to access.
Absolutely, yes.
Now, developing support networks like this in rural communities, they were there for a while and they kind of faded out. Well, why is it important to bring them back?
Well, I think the biggest thing is that, when you're diagnosed, we want people to know that they're not alone, right? Like, this is a major life-changing diagnosis that happens with people, and trying to navigate that without having support from the community or from having, it's sometimes quite confusing. Mm-hmm. And so, just making sure that we're setting people up with support and the ability to talk. So one of the bigger initiatives that we will have coming through the pipeline into the fall here is the onset of an actual peer support group.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that, like when I was first diagnosed, I looked out for something to learn from other people. And I think it was really nice to be able to go to that room of small group people, and there was information from Calgary Celiac at the time. And it just, you don't feel so alone.
Yeah.
That's what's really important. And I think it's important for all age groups. So it's not just adults. So it's parents who maybe have children who are diagnosed. What does that mean for them? It's for seniors who are maybe moving and living a different kind of life on their own. And how do we support the senior? So it's that across the lifespan.
So how would someone in Medicine Hat get in contact with you?
Well, we have a Facebook group that is specific to Medicine Hat called the Medicine Hat Celiac Support Network. And that's probably the best place to get our information or to look for it. They can always reach out to me, but I don't think we really have phone numbers or anything like that. So that's the best way, I think, is to use our Facebook. If they don't have Facebook, they can get in touch with Calgary Celiac and they'd be able to pass on some.
Yeah, our webpage there. And as I mentioned, there will be individual portions of the webpage associated with the different locations. And of course, we do have office staff that work within the Calgary Celiac office. So if somebody particularly is newly diagnosed, typically the first line of action of that. So I'm going to backtrack for a minute, because do you know how people are diagnosed?
Well, I was going to ask you that. Like, if someone is watching or listening and they think, maybe that's me.
Yeah.
What's the first step? So
the first thing is that, you need to, I would suggest advocating with your family physician if you are suspicious that you may have it. Typically, we start with a blood test. And the blood test, what I want to say about that is that is not the definitive diagnosis. That's kind of the starting point, because sometimes the blood test results can be false positives or negatives. The true diagnosis comes from a gastrointestinal biopsy of your small intestine, and that is done through an endoscopy. And basically what happens is that when you have celiac disease, the little villi that you have in your small intestine become flattened, right? And that's why we're no longer processing different types of minerals and things like that going through the body, the nutrients that we need. So typically if somebody does then go on to have a gluten-free lifestyle and go on the diet, then the villi hopefully start to respond, and then people will start to feel better. So once the diagnosis is typically done, usually the specialist or the physician hopefully would refer to a dietitian. So there's a number of local dietitians here with the health region that specialize in celiac disease. I believe you can contact the Alberta Healthy Living Program as well to help facilitate seeing the dietitian. In addition to that, we also do provide education courses. So first of all, Celiac Canada has a national 101 course that is done on the web, and it's usually once a month, and it's taught by a dietitian, and it's about a 2-hour webinar that kind of takes you through how to read a label and, all of those kinds of things. And in addition to that, this is where sort of the peer support program will come in a little bit, an opportunity to provide a bit of that local flavor of what is it like navigating day-to-day life in Medicine Hat with, where the places you could shop at. We are working on a grocery store tour right now, so we just need to garner enough interest for that. But there is a partnership with Save On Foods and a local dietitian, Jennifer Patterson.
Oh, I know Jennifer, yeah.
Yeah, so great girl. And so we just need to have enough people to signed up to logistically offer a session, and she said that she'd be more than happy to facilitate that. So,
are there recipe books or recipes for celiac?
There is so much out there. I wanted to say, the year I got diagnosed, that Christmas, what I got for presents was cookbooks and specialty treats. So many specialty treats. Everybody went out of their way to buy gluten-free treats. So yes, there are lots. There's lots online as well, Brian. There's some excellent cookbooks out there and resources online.
So it sounds like if someone's just being diagnosed, the first thing that they should take is that you're not alone.
Absolutely.
100%.
For sure.
Yeah.
I'm going to do a shout out for a colleague as well. Shelley Case is a dietitian, and she's from Regina, then Calgary. She's highly involved in Celiac Canada. She has also written a book that's had a number of different printings, and it's the Complete Guide to Living Gluten-Free. And it's part cookbook, part educational awareness book, and it's a fantastic resource.
Okay. So the month of May is Celiac Awareness Month. Mm-hmm. If there was one thing that you would like to get out of this, maybe a change in legislation or people's awareness, if you could just wave your magic wand, throw some magic pixie dust out there, any ideas what that would be? Either in terms of restaurants doing things or, government helping out, that kind of thing.
It's hard to pick one. I mean, we know on a local level our hands are tied with making the huge difference in the governmental level. We can sign petitions, we can try and advocate. I would say, for me personally, it's the local partnerships. So looking at having discussions with restaurants, but also looking at having discussions with food partnerships. So places that provide the foods to the restaurants, like Cisco and like Gordon Food Services. And, they carry a lot of gluten-free products already, but is it really well known in the restaurant industry, in the hospitality industry in general, in hospital settings, right? So trying to advocate that there's a number of ways in which we can try to promote a better navigation of gluten-free and reducing risks of cross-contaminations as well.
The one thing for me would be to connect with the people in Medicine Hat and to know that they're not alone, to have that, to help build the community, celiac community, because I think that our grocery stores do their best, but we're always asking each other, where did you find this and where did you find that? And, what about this? And so I think it's about helping our community within Medicine Hat to function and learn from each other and help each other.
I'm just going to go off the board here because it just occurred to me that when you're an adult, you can deal with this. What about a child?
Oh, that's a whole other ballgame.
Someone in elementary school, your friend's got a cookie or something, and
I'm gonna speak to that actually because I'm a retired physiotherapist and I worked with kids, and many of the children I worked with had autism, but not all of them, and we had some group activities that we organized, and so when we organized them, I found out some of these kids were celiac and living gluten-free. And as a physio, that's not a typical question you would necessarily ask, but I found out. And so when we would have snack, and we would, bring their snack to the park, and to know that, hey, these Oreos are gluten-free, and you can eat them, the kids' eyes would just light up. Hearing from families through after, the chit chat that happens, school is a challenge. Yeah. We think of peanut allergies, for example, in the schools. So it is really challenging for those kids where they eat. Kids will share lunches. They want to have it. That's very hard for kids. Mm-hmm. It's a really tough road. And so making sure that there are treats that they can have within a school, I think, is really important. So another piece of that is helping to educate educators.
What about a medical alert bracelet? Is that something that...
Yep, there are some people that do that for sure.
Or
that
carry a
can be
card in
helpful.
your wallet or purse?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I want to add to the comment about children as well. So for the month of May, we also have an event called Kids Teach Kids Day. And it is a national initiative where if a child has celiac disease and they want to share that information with their classmates and educate them about celiac disease, we have kind of a little bit of a kit that we put together that's got, some detailed information on a child's level of what celiac disease is and some fun activities that they can do in the classroom. And so if you're listening out there and you find out that your child might be interested in pursuing something like this, Celiac Kids Teach Kids Day is going to be on the 15th of the month. The 14th of the month. And it's going to be, we provide the children with T-shirts, with the actual press kit, with cookies that they can share with their classmates that are gluten-free. So that's another way that we can kind of increase that awareness.
So if I was going to sum it up, if someone is just newly diagnosed, I think that there is help and there is hope.
Absolutely.
Oh, 100%. And I think that the first year can be tough because you're trying to navigate and you're thinking about the things you can't have. That's the initial, right? The loss. You go through those stages of grief because you are losing some of that, and it's to find the replacements and to know that you can thrive living with celiac disease.
Anything else you want to add before we say goodbye?
Yeah, if you want to come by and, not just the breakfast and the focus group, but we're going to be in the mall as well. We're taking advantage of the new space in the mall for nonprofits, so we're going to be there on May the 9th from about 10 to 2, and we'll have lots of information available. Please feel free to stop in and ask questions.
Celiac Awareness Month, going to be busy. Thank you for the visit.
Thank you for the opportunity.